We welcome you here today on this beautiful morning for the first Buechner Institute program of 2015. On this day, as a nation, that we have set aside to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today is also the birthday of Edgar Allan Poe, who was born in 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, who wrote, "In a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream." And yesterday was the birthday of A.A. Milne, born in 1882, who created Winnie the Pooh, right? Winnie the Pooh, who said, "On Wednesday, when the sky is blue and I have nothing else to do, I sometimes wonder if it's true that who is what and what is who." So you see, Pooh and Poe, deep thinkers and philosophers both. Now let me bring up a deep thinker, King alum, and our colleague from Virginia Highlands Community College, Tommy Bryant, to introduce today's speaker. Thank you.
I don't know about that deep thinker stuff, but I do know that it's really strange that I've been asked to do this twice, and I sometimes wonder. Says, yeah, the one black person that Shannon knows, I have to work on Martin Luther King. Virginia Highlands is closed. I could have slept in, but she goes, hey, I know this one guy. And I'm always glad to come to King. I graduated from King in 2001. I was an adjunct instructor. I was sharing an office with Dr. Story, soon to be Dr. Story. And we had a lot of fun in there, but I hope none of those stories get out because it might ruin his reputation on campus. I'm very glad to be here this morning. William Turner received his undergraduate degree from the University of Kentucky and his MA and PhD he earned from Notre Dame. And he completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Duke University. I was born in Lenore County, North Carolina, so I forgive you for being a Blue Devil. You should have been a Tar Heel. Turner is a Harlan County native, and the majority of his work has been focused on African Americans in Appalachia. That is, in fact, the title of his book, Blacks in Appalachia. The book's introduction highlights the motivation behind the book's creation. I quote, "The essays selected for inclusion demonstrate that blacks in the Appalachian region are neither aberrations nor epiphenomena, neither invisible nor insignificant." Turner's also published an essay on his chosen subject in the Encyclopedia of Southern Culture. For 2 decades, he wrote editorial columns for the Chronicle, an African American weekly, and he also writes material for Black Voices, a section of the Huffington Post. Perhaps during his life, Dr. Turner has been asked why he wanted to delve into the topic of blacks in Appalachia. Blacks, after all, make up a very small percentage of a population in a rural, disenfranchised area. However, that might also be the reason for his work. After all, we've seen in recent news events where blacks have been killed and those responsible have faced no punishment. So let us hope that Dr. Turner continues his work so that events like those will cease to occur, will happen less often, or that at least those responsible will be held to some account. A few years ago, I had the privilege of hearing Dr. Turner speak at UVA Wise, and I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to hear him this morning. I welcome to the stage scholar, activist, teacher, mentor, and writer, Dr. William Turner.
I met this lady a few moments ago. Her name is Miss Banks. Wilhelmina? Miss Wilhelmina Banks said that she spent time in Dar es Salaam. So if we were in Dar, I would say Salam Alaikum. No, I would say, how do you say good morning in Swahili? Habari gani bwana? Missouri. If does anybody speak Spanish? That we could say, hey, y'all folks in East Tennessee better get to know some Spanish. I'm telling you. Okay, let's see. If we were in, had we come from, Je suis Charlie. If we were in Paris or Champs-Élysées, we would say, bonjour, bonjour. And if we were in, let's see, where else we might be? If we were in Johannesburg, and if we could click Hosa, we might say house seat. Is that right? If we were in Japan, we could say konnichiwa. I know how to say hello in about 40 languages. My grandmother taught me to do. Now, if we were in my hometown, I grew up in Lynch, Kentucky. It's in Harlan County. Any of you ever been to Harlan County, Kentucky? And when I leave here this morning, God willing, I'm going to go to my grandmother's birthplace, which is on Toms Creek in Wise County near Coburn. Anybody know where that is? And I'm going to go see my aunt who lives in Big Stone Gap. And y'all know where that is. All right, then we'll go see my buddy Ron Carson, who lives in Pennington Gap. So I'm a mountain man, a boy, as it were, basically. Although I live in Houston, Texas right now, because I wanted to go and be near my grandchildren. We have 4 grandchildren. Our sons lived in Houston, and most recently when I lived in this region, I lived in Berea, Kentucky. I was at a small college called Berea. And our children say, Daddy, we're not coming back to Kentucky, man. Forget about that. So we moved to Houston 2 years ago, and it's something. Now, is the president here? Mr. Ray, well, Dr. Ray is his name. I wrote that down. I saw that somewhere. Interim president. Well, I'll tell you what. There's a person also I met this morning. God is good to me. I met the real president of King University. Jewel, would you please stand up? I don't care who they say the president is. All you young people, I'm telling you, don't pay Shannon, I don't mean this the wrong way. Don't pay her any attention, young people. Shannon Harris, she's a wonderful person with a doctorate. She's really, really bright. But if you really want to know anything about King University, go to Miss Bell. Go to Jewel. That's what Shannon told me she does. Shannon said, when I want to know where the bones are buried, that's an old expression that when you want to know the dirt, then go to, is that right, Jewel? It's so nice to meet you, so nice to meet you. I sincerely thank y'all for inviting me. I want to thank Shannon Harris so much and the people at the Buechner Institute. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, sir, and I'm happy to be here, as King said a long time ago at the March on Washington, on this auspicious occasion. It's pretty cool, I guess. I may be the only person in the world speaking on the subject of Dr. King at King University. Kind of clouds are aligning there. Now, very quickly, I want to do 3 things, and what I have to do is 9:21. How much time am I supposed to get here? 4. Good. I think I can get through this in 30 minutes at the moment. But if you remember nothing, I'm going to do. Somebody taught me a long time ago at the Lynch Colored School. That was the name of the high school I went to. It was called Lynch. I grew up in a town called Lynch. Lynch, Kentucky. It was actually named after the president of the United States Steel, which is at the time, in 1917 when my hometown came online, it was the most highly capitalized company in the United States of America, was U.S. Steel. They owned coal mines throughout the South in Gary, West Virginia, all of McDowell County, West Virginia, Harlan, Kentucky, Birmingham, Alabama, called the Steel City, was owned lock, stock, and barrel by United States Steel, which also owned Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is why I never liked the Pittsburgh Steelers. My father worked for the United States Steel for 52 years. I have the paycheck my daddy got the week I was born in 1946. My daddy bought on $41 after 77 hours of work. And he had 5 children. I don't know why I went to that, but somewhere at the Lynch Colored School, I was taught when you give a speech, you do 3 things. Before you start, you tell people what you're going to tell them, and you tell them what you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. If you can do that, that's all I have to do in a speech. So here's what I'm going to tell you. It's essentially this. I think the title of my presentation is The Disneyfication, excuse me, The Disneyfication of Martin Luther King. If I had to make it over again, I gave that to Dale Brown back in June when he asked me to come here, God rest his soul. I would retitle it, giving a movie I saw recently. I commend some of you to go see this movie called Selma. I would retitle my speech, instead of The Disneyfication of Martin Luther King, I would entitle it The Oprahfication of Martin Luther King. So here's what I would say. Don't accept what comes over the screen, particularly if it says it's going to recount a historical event. Don't accept what it says as little more than based on a true story. It may not be that true story. As Abraham Lincoln is quoted, don't believe half the stuff you see on the internet. Don't believe half of that stuff you see when you go to a movie. So I want you to leave it and say, this man said, don't believe half of this stuff you read about Martin Luther King. Don't believe half of that stuff. That's the anchor of my presentation. And I'll anchor it around two little poems that I'll repeat in a minute here, and then I'll make a few points about Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, then I'll be over. Okay, now, the first thing I would say, as you know, when you talk about Martin Luther King and what he stood for and all of that, this hallowed ground on which we stand, I understand, King University. I suspect this place, this area was a plantation. Yep, 1860s, this man named King, he and his buddies had to get out of the Presbyterian church, I understand. Now I'm lying, right? Y'all look like, oh God, you're not going to say it. They were on the wrong side of the Civil War. They said it themselves. Go look at your website. It says, this university has its roots in the great upheavals and sharp divisions associated with the Civil War. According to the record, the Presbyterians who supported the Confederate cause found themselves without a church. Uh-oh. And so Brother King said, I guess we better come up with us another school. Y'all looking at me like, he made that up. It's on your website. I didn't make it up. Now, between then and now, 1867 and now, we're proud to note that in 1967, 100 years later, the United Presbyterian Church, y'all know this church split over the war. The United Presbyterian Church gave Martin Luther King $5,000 a week to support a guy named Jose Williams, who was the chief organizer for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So by 1967, the United United Presbyterian Church was supporting the Civil Rights Movement and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in great numbers. $5,000 a week was a lot of money back. That's a lot of money today. That's lottery money. And the Presbyterians were doing that. And you know, back to my own life, I grew up so far back out the woods in Harlan County, I didn't know what a Presbyterian was until I was 20. I went to college, I just said, Presbyterians are Baptists who went to college. That's all I ever knew about Presbyterians. And then my dearest friend, my mentor, the man who taught me everything I know, was a Presbyterian. His name was John Bell Stevenson. John died in 1984 when he was president of Berea College. But I met John when I was 20 at the University of Kentucky. He had come out of Lees McRae College over in the mountain here in Banner Elk, and he studied at Carolina. And so that's all I had known about Presbyterians. But presently, I think when you look at what the Buechner Institute's doing, you guys are doing a lot of good things. I want to thank Ms. Fagan and Ms. Davis once again, Ms. Harris once again. And first, let me say I'm a little bit anxious and a little bit trepidation up here on this subject. And it's easy for me to talk about this stuff I want to talk about, but a lot of people are uneasy about it. Race is the most uneasy subject for people to discuss in America, bar none. It is the most uneasy subject. For example, despite the fact that I studied under some fine minds in some fine colleges, I even had postdoctoral studies with C. Eric Lincoln, who was one of the most prolific writers about the subject of race and culture that has ever lived at Duke University. I studied with John Hope Franklin, who was the historian on these matters. And I think I know some of this stuff. And sometimes I sit down and talk with people about race who, as my grandmama would say, don't know boodly squat about the subject, but they still disagree with me. For example, I have 7 men in my family who had some form of prostate cancer. And so I've been struggling with prostate issues, had 4 or 5 biopsies, I can't even remember. And I go to my urologist, and this guy talks about cancer at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, and he talks about all sorts of cancer, and he tells me these things. He gives me medicines that he says, in effect, this stuff has some bad side effects, your hair is going to fall out, and then he tells me all this stuff, and I don't like the medicine. He gives me these recommendations as to what to do, and I do it without ever questioning him because he knows what he's talking about. But of course, on the subject of race and its various and sundry expressions, I couldn't realize a long time ago that unlike my oncologist friend, on this subject, 9 out of 10 people I talk to will always come up with their own opinion, their own assessment, their own judgments, no matter what the facts are. Don't confuse me with the facts. I've made up my mind. That's what they say. So my dear friends here on this King for a Day, I'm just going to know that some of you all will not agree with my analysis, because Black people and white people in America live in two parallel worlds. Yes, they do. They live in two parallel worlds. Most white people live in predominantly white communities. Most black people live in predominantly black communities. They live in two dissimilar, disparate. They have different income and wealth holding notions. Most black and white Americans have different and dissimilar attitudinal, psychological, and emotional spaces and places. We live in different worlds. Fact is, every now and then, one of my white brothers or sisters will say something that is so patently stupid and asinine about race that I stop and I get on my knees and I pray to God that He won't let me cuss them out. And these are intelligent people. And one friend asked me, he says, Bill, if you think about it, had your people not been captured in wherever you were on Goree Island, let's assume that your people did not get captured and caught up. I had the opportunity about 11 years of my life. I worked for Alex Haley. So I learned a lot about genealogical studies when Mr. Haley was doing roots and all that stuff. And this guy asked me, he said, I can quote it, he said, let me find it. He said to me the other day, if black Americans would be as well off today if they had not been captured and made slaves. What if your family got left in Gambia or Senegal or wherever? And I said, that's patently absurd. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go along with black people would have been better off had they not been slaves. If you'll go along, and this guy's name, by the way, was Otterberg. I said, if you'll go along with the Jews are stronger because they had the Holocaust. He didn't say another word to me. He shut up. He just looked at Bill, that ain't fair. How'd you come back so logically? I mean, just think of some of the absurd things people say in this notion of race. So it's going to take a bit of nerve. The whole thing is nothing but a cultural interpretation. We have a cultural war. If there's anything about Dr. King you want to read and know the best, it was when he spoke to clerics. He said, the church is the greatest harbinger of our problems. Go read the letter from a Birmingham jail. Who do you think he wrote that to? He wrote that to ministers. He says, because they were saying, Martin, if you weren't doing all this stuff, you wouldn't be in there. And like Thoreau said, as Thoreau said, he looked back at him and said, you should be in here with me. This is where you should be. You should be in prison. You should be fighting for this. So I know this whole subject is kind of uncomfortable. And so when I think of this new movie, the truth of it is that I love a statement by my friend, not my friend, this actor named Jack Nicholson in a movie called A Few Good Men 20, 30 years ago. And he was quoted as saying, the truth? You can't handle the truth. And when it comes to race, most people can. And so I'm a little scared to do it, but look, I hope I'm not taking too much time. Here's the best thing to let you know how nervous I am about this. Because I want to unmask some things, I want to undress some things, I want you know when you take your clothes off, and you see all these warts and wrinkles, and little things you go, ooh, dress back up. There's a story told about an old man in my hometown, we'll call him Mr. Charlie. Mr. Charlie was a black man, he was a portraitist. He could paint and draw better than anybody. And he would paint your picture and frame and all that for less than $30 or $40. So this certain lady from a high-class family came into his little studio once and she said, Charlie, I want you to paint me in the nude. Is it okay to say nude in a chapel? Where's the dean of the chapel I met this morning? Mr. What's his name? Sir, where are you? Is that okay? So she said, Charlie, I want you to paint me in the nude. And he looked at her, he said, well, I don't know about that, Miss Days. You know, drive Miss Days. It was that kind of scene. He said, I don't know about that. Held his hand down like black men used to do because they couldn't look at white females. And he said, I don't know. She said, well, I'll tell you what, Charlie, I want you to paint me in the nude. And I'll give you $500, which is roughly 100 times more than you usually got. He said, $500? She said, yes. Paint me in the nude, I'll give you $500. He said, And before he could exhale good, because he was still thinking about it, she upped it to $1,000. He said, you'll give me $1,000 to paint you in the nude? And she said, yep. He said, okay then, but I'm gonna keep my socks on. So, I'm going to paint a couple of pictures, but I'm not going to be completely, I'll keep my socks on. All right. So when you look at a film like Selma and these made-for-TV things, what I want you to understand, particularly my friends in history, is that they often make conspicuous oversights of history. They only tell the nice parts. I want to say something for a moment about what happened recently in France. The people at Charlie Hebdo, they took a lot of dramatic license, and sometimes even the Pope asked recently, where does freedom of speech stop and where does hate speech start? You got to be very careful with that. This week's issue of the New Yorker shows the Eiffel Tower sitting in a pool of blood, but at the top is a red pin. Because the French are real satirists. They love that. That's part of French culture, as long as you're French. But for some people, you have to remember that was the essence of that controversy over there. What is the line between satire and denigration? So if you look at some of the things about Dr. King, watch the Selma movie very carefully. One of the things about it is that Oprah Winfrey, God bless her soul, is one of the best commercial people in the world. They deliberately, before they picked up their pens, they say, we're going to release it the third Monday in January 2015. It started 6 years ago. They knew, when do you release films? Around King Day. One of the assertions I would make, paraphrasing one of my friends, Reverend Kevin Cosby, a preacher in Louisville, he says, we've gotten to the place that the King holiday is nothing but a sophisticated Groundhog Day. I told you I was going to cut my shirt off. He says, a sophisticated Groundhog Day. We pull him out of this hole once a year, see if the sun's going to shine, and put him back. And we forget about it. Half the people in America go skiing somewhere on this day. You think they're somewhere out doing a king for a day? Of course not. They're on vacation. It's a long weekend. They're in Boulder. Or maybe across the mountain in Boone if they made some snow. But the fact of the matter is we've taken it out of the cage, and God bless them, but Dr. King's children, if you go check them out real carefully, Dexter King and his brother, Martin Luther King III, do you all know what they did recently? They chose to auction off Dr. King's Bible. They want to sell his Nobel Prize for 100 shekels. Dexter King wanted to turn Dexter Avenue Baptist. What was that church in Atlanta? Dexter King's Church. Wasn't it Dexter?
Ebenezer.
Huh?
Ebenezer.
He wanted to turn that whole area, which is owned by the National Park Service, he wanted to turn it into a kind of I Have a Dream Disneyland. He wanted to charge admission to get down that street. Dr. King's own children. Yes, they're fighting their sister, their remaining sister. What's her name, guy? Is it Yolanda? Yes, because the one who's a minister died. But the three of them are fighting in a lawsuit. They sued Harry Belafonte to get some things that they sued the man who, when King walked off the stage in Washington in 1963 with that speech, a man said, can I have that? And Dr. King said, sure. And he gave it to him. And the King children are suing that man because they want to sell that speech. Now, this is no hocus pocus, but you won't see this on the internet. It's not in the movie. A lot of these things about Dr. King, we have to remember the script of history often gets flipped. The truth isn't that entertainment, and there's a great difference between a writer's matters of opinion and the archival record. The movie we have seen, and I'm particularly happy, a white female, in fact, Diane McWhorter, Pulitzer Prize person who's done things on the civil rights movement, she said, at a time when racial tensions in America are at an all-time high, Oprah Winfrey chose to bastardize history in that movie. She accused her. We changed history. Go look at that movie and then go read about those events and you will see the movie is one thing, the history is another. A lot of my feminist friends have a wonderful way of putting it when they study American history in light of gender. They say, yes, why do you think they call it history? His story. It's not the woman's story. Men make that stuff up. When I was growing up, 9, 10 years old, every Saturday, my grandma would give me a quarter and we would go to the movie. Because that's where we learned stuff. And the favorite movie once a month was Tarzan of Greystoke, Johnny Weissmuller. My Lord, there I was, a little nappy-headed colored boy up in the second floor of a segregated theater watching a white man kill African people with a dagger by himself and slay lions and tigers and gorillas and crocodiles. A white gentleman named Tarzan and his white wife named Jane and a little boy named Boy and a monkey named Cheetah. And I would go, whoa, man, that's fascinating. That was where I got my first impressions of Africa. Not from Basil Davidson. I got it from the movies. I was 10. I thought Africa was a land of savages. I didn't want anything to do with Africans. I put stuff in my hair to process it and make it straight. I wanted to lighten my skin. I wanted to be anything except associated with those Africans. Why? Because the Europeans depicted the Africans as a bunch of savages. And there I was looking in the mirror saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the darkest of them all? Me. And I wanted to hide from myself because of what? That's what these things will do to us. And so when you look at these movies, the central line was very good, but a lot of it made no sense. I'm so happy that at the New Year, one of the most iconic persons of the young generation named Mark Zuckerberg said the following: I have made a New Year's resolution to challenge my 30 million Facebook followers. Mark Zuckerberg. He has 30 million followers. And he said, my resolution is I'm going to read more books. Yes. He said, books will allow you to more fully explore a topic and immerse yourself in a deeper way than most media today do. God bless him. Because I teach college and I see people who don't read. They write my term papers to do this. I said, this is no darn tweet. I want a paper, boy, with a subject and a predicate and a verb. You call this writing? You call that Facebook, that's not reading? But that's what our culture does. So I look forward to Zuckerberg's 30 million young people shifting more toward media called a piece of paper and a book. So the crux of my story, and one of the poems I want to do very quickly, is from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and it says, tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, the one that doesn't read, and things are not what they seem. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives more sublime, for in departing leave behind them footprints in the sands of time. Now, those footprints that Dr. King left were exceptional, and the poet captured them very well. But the fact of the matter is that most of the footprints the movies give us about King say, do, think, and teach very little about that man. They made him some comfortable kind of hero, and in a sense, if you go and look at King's, what he wanted people to remember him for, we have done just the opposite in this culture that celebrates celebrities even when they have very little talent. We are a celebrity. He said to people the night, a week or two before he died, he said, when I die, please don't have a long funeral. I went to Dr. King's funeral. It was all day long. April 9th, 1968, I went to Atlanta. It was all day. He said, please just tell people that I tried to live my life serving other people. That's all I wanted people to know. I tried to love people. I got 300 or 400 honorary. I won a Nobel Peace Prize. He said, but that's not important because all I want to do is to be a servant. Everybody can't be like me, but everybody can be a servant. See, if everybody would serve like King and try to clothe naked people and feed hungry people and visit people in prison and love and serve people, we'd be a lot better off. But we pull out, we warm over that speech once or twice a year, and we think we've done everything. King did not want us to venerate or elevate him in just the opposite of what we've done. We've turned him into a kind of patriotic myth. In fact, I would dare say if you study American history, a lot of times you'll see photographs of Dr. King depicted with John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, because they were the Attorney General and the President during that period. John F. Kennedy, God rest his soul, is on writing as saying he did not want that march on Washington. He didn't want it. His brother, the Attorney General, said, get that away from you. You'll embarrass us, Martin. What are you doing? And Martin said, I'm sorry. We're coming to Washington. We want the world to know. And in fact, Martin Luther King didn't even go to Washington talking about race. His real thing was about income inequality. It was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And here we are 55 years later, and today 52% of all children in America live in poverty. 50 years later. 52% of America's children get free lunches. 52 years later. So we've kind of folded King up in a way to do this. And let me give you another illustration. That March on Washington, which they throw at you young people as though that was some kind of kumbaya, something that went on in Woodstock somewhere, like it was a big party. Well, you have to remember the FBI, in the form of a man named J. Edgar Hoover, they treated Martin Luther King like Osama bin Laden. They said he was the most dangerous man in America in 1964. He is the most dangerous man right here in East Tennessee. I commend some of you young people sometimes, you got nothing else to do. Go down Interstate 81, make a right turn on Interstate 40, go to Knoxville, go west, and stop at a place called New Market, Tennessee. Go to a place called the Highlander Center. Go there. Write it down. Highlander Center. Martin Luther King, Septimus Clark, Rosa Parks, the man who founded the Highlander Center, somebody help me. Miles Martin. Go there, the Carowinds. Go there and you will see that it was in East Tennessee in 1950s, 1953 in Mount Eagle, Tennessee. You would see photographs the size of this building with Martin Luther King on it saying, "What a communist, let's get rid of this fellow." Right here in East Tennessee, down Lee Highway. You still got Lee Highway right here? Highway 11, isn't it? Yes, they had billboards all up and down through there when I was a boy. I come over here with my dad and see my grandmama. Martin Luther King was depicted like Osama bin Laden. Don't let nobody fool you and act like we were all. I dare ask some of y'all who got grandparents the age of me and Jewel Bell. Sometimes you sit with your grandma and say, "Grandma, what side would you on?" See what she said. Don't y'all get quiet on me. Yeah, just sit down. Call your grandma when you leave. Say, "Granny, aren't you 76? Yes. What were you doing in 63? What were your parents doing, Granny?" And ask them. I mean, there was a time in the South when hanging black people was sport. They'd go to it like the Super Bowl playoff games on Friday nights. That's what they did. In the last few years, we've gotten all this mess about the use of the N-word among rappers. The N-word was used by, first time I saw it real good was Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn. It was a common word used throughout the South. That's the way people refer to us. And people act like all this stuff is new. So when you look at what happened, SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Southern men and women, black and white, who said it is the responsibility of Christians, they were treated as though they were ISIS. They considered their acts terrorist acts. They didn't call it terrorism when people bombed churches and blow little girls up. The complicity of the police and the authorities with the Ku Klux Klan. So there's a part of history, young people, that they never let you see. They never taught it to you. And you owe it to yourself to go and read it so you will understand Ferguson, so you will understand Zimmerman, so you will understand Trayvon, so you will understand I can't breathe. You have to understand that because it all goes back to an interpretation of history. Have no history, you have no idea. And that's the problem. So you have to remember, the soul is dead that slumbers and things are not what they seem. So Dr. King has been repackaged, recast, redesigned, and depicted in a very attractive way. The dream speech is the limit of which many of us use to know and judge anything we know about Dr. King. And in fact, when you look at that speech quite differently, you have to remember, a lot of my friends say to me, what do you think Dr. King would say about the fact that the President of the United States is black for the last 8 years? I think he would say, when members of an underrepresented group rise to positions of power, they should use them in the most powerful way. And he would say, I don't care if the President of the United States is black, I believe in nonviolence. I would withdraw from Afghanistan. I would withdraw from any war front. Dr. King would be very upset with the use of drone warfare by any president. He wouldn't care. He would say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Eventually you will have a blind, toothless world. Just cut it out. He would not go along with the reactions we make to terrorism, I don't believe. Dr. King was a revolutionary Christian. And a lot of us are willing to go that far with our Christianity as he did. Because it took a lot to do what he did. When you think about the fact, I am now 39 years older than Dr. King was when he died. He gave his dream speech when he was 34. He was leading the Southern Christian Leadership Conference when he was 24. Some of y'all 24 haven't done nothing with your lives yet. Some of y'all are 54, 64, 74. When you think about what that man did, which is why he stands where he does today. Let me just read a couple things for him about him. In 2000, in a Gallup poll, Dr. King was tied with John F. Kennedy and Albert Einstein as two of the most admired public figures in the 20th century. He's ranks in popularity with FDR. He's higher than Pope John II and Sir Winston Churchill. And 4 years ago, we erected on the National Mall on 4 of the most prime acres of real estate in this country, and 90% of Americans approved it going there. But you have to remember, when the King holiday was proposed and Ronald Reagan was the president, that was a big fight over that. Mr. Reagan signed that quite reluctantly. He didn't want to do it. The U.S. Congress didn't want to do it. When he signed the bill declaring the King holiday, Mr. Reagan was asked, do you still say, as you said, when you were the governor of California, that Dr. King was no more than a communist sympathizer, Mr. Reagan? Mr. Reagan said, quote, we'll know in 35 years, won't we? Because that's when they're going to open up those surveillance tapes that the FBI has on Martin Luther King, and they said they would not open them until he was dead 100 years. And God knows how much surveillance has gone on since then, when, Snowden had all that stuff he had. I wonder what they have on you. I wonder what they have on you. Have you done anything for them? If you're not on that list, then you haven't done very much. I see a sister back here. I bet you she's all over there. How are you? Oh, Lord, let me get off of that. So here's my point. Don't let anybody go unchallenged who tells you that the majority of people in this country accepted Dr. King, or ever let people tell you that America moved toward racial acceptance and progress naturally. Americans fought this. Americans are still fighting progress. They're not called the Ku Klux Klan anymore. I would stand forth and say they might be called the Tea Party. It's nothing but the evolution of the same forces from King's time to this time. It's still a cultural war. There are people in different camps. They call themselves by different names. They're no more hooded people with white sheets on their heads, but they're still around. And don't you ever think that they are. America at that time was like a dysfunctional drug addict or an alcoholic, and it was addicted to and dependent on racial segregation. That was America's crack cocaine. Racial segregation, racial hatred. 1963, 1964, 1954. And along comes King, and he got him into a program of recovery through civil disobedience. So I would say to you, it may be best to remember Dr. King in some other ways, because Dr. King was not a Disney character. Let me end on this note. There are a couple of other things I had, but I don't want to go over my time. I think that this point to be made is that you don't have to graduate from King University to be a great person. Dr. King says the greatest thing you could be is a servant of other people. You don't have to have your verbs and your nouns match up in order to be great. They don't have to match up. You don't have to be a Plato and Aristotle to serve other people. And I commend any young people in this country who, by the accident of birth, are white. I commend you to go out of your personal space and get to know somebody other than your own kind, as it were. If you live my age and you live in America to get in your 60s, those of you in your 20s, and you happen by the accident of birth to be white, you're going to live in a minority country. Hello? You been to Houston lately? Houston's 53% Mexican. Been to LA lately? You been to Washington, D.C.? You better stay in East Tennessee then. If you want some comfortable, homogeneous place, go to Harlan County, Kentucky somewhere, because the rest of the world is far different than that. And we're all going to have to live together as brothers and sisters, or as King says, we're going to have to die like fools. And that's for all of us. And so every one of us has some responsibility. If we really take King seriously, you don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity. You don't have to know anything about thermodynamics to do these things. As King says, if you want to be like me, all you have to have is a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love, that everybody can be of service. Now, the last thing I want to say is to go back to that Charlie Hebdo moment. You might remember in Paris a few weeks ago, 100 times the people who turned out to march on Washington, I think 250,000 people came to the March on Washington. A week and a half ago at the Charlie Hebdo rally, guess how many Frenchmen turned out? 3.4 million. 3.4 million people marched through the streets, and their cry was what in French? Je suis Charlie. Je suis, I am Charlie. I am Charlie. What you did to them, you do to me. So I have a new plan for King University. I want all of you, somebody who's an artist student, to go and get the King symbol, like on your college's insignia, where it says King, and then put above it, Je suis. Je suis King. Got me? You see that t-shirt, young lady? Okay. But on the side of King, where the K is, put ML. And have it red and white and blue. On y'all colors, red, white, and blue. That's very American. I can see it now. Bristol filled with young students going over to Boone next week somewhere, going to the Walmart, somebody's going to say, buddy, what's je suis mean? You'll have to explain it to people. That's what students do, explain it. So can you see when you say, I am king, it's a double meaning for you. You're a king that founded King University, but you can also be Martin Luther King. You can live like Dr. King. You can be like Dr. King as long as you serve other people, get out of your own comfort zone, and get to know other people. The other poem I leave you with that was a favorite of Dr. King's talked about the requirement in order to really get out of that comfort zone. And he had this wonderful little poem I'll leave you with, and it goes like this. It speaks to the fact that we all live in our little comfortable places where life is very safe. We all live in our safe little gated neighborhoods. I saw these two big gates outside this campus here. We all live in these gated little places, right? Where I keep my boat in my slip in Galveston is in a little place so that when the waters come up real bad, it's behind the jet. Doesn't touch my boat. Imagine that. So King loved a speech from Howard Thurman, and it goes like this. It says, I am tired of sailing my little boat far inside the harbor bar. I want to go way, way, way out there where the big ships are. And if by chance my failed craft proves too slight for the winds that blow the billows o'er, I would rather drown out there than rest here safely next to the shore. So I leave you with the thought of Dr. King. That young man went way, way, way out there at a very early age in his life and committed himself to something, and you won't see it in the movies. It was much more profound than that. I commend you to read his book, Where Do We Go From Here? His last book, Chaos or Community. Read his wife's book, My Life with Martin Luther King. David Garrow's works on King, and especially Google a man named Vincent Harding. Vincent Harding wrote a book called Martin Luther King, the Unwilling Hero, because he really didn't want all the adoration. Well, I said I was going to take off everything except my socks. I hope I haven't said anything too untoward or left anybody thinking that I don't like people, or there are certain people I don't like, or whatever. And I started by talking about the fact that this subject can be disquieting, but I do want you young people, particularly young people, to go forth and learn more about Dr. King than what has been oprahsized and Disneyfied about Dr. King. Thank you so much. God bless you for coming, and I appreciate it.
I want to let you know that if anyone is interested in having, I think I have to put it down here. If anyone is interested in having lunch with Dr. Turner, he will be in the cafeteria today across the way at 11:30. So I invite you to that. And tonight he will be with us again at the Bristol Public Library at 7 p.m. And remember our next Buechner program, the anniversary event with Philip Yancey, which will occur on February 7th at the First Presbyterian Church at 4 o'clock. And I have to say to Tommy, he is not the only black man I know. However, he's the only one that is in education that I don't have to fly in from somewhere, so he's really cheap. So, so I hope that you all will have a wonderful day and take the wise words that Dr. Turner gave you. Go and do good.